Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka Mono Bluetron, demoing my deck that I played for my Day 2 finish at the National NAWCQ last weekend. We're doing this at an Airbnb a couple of days after because the one we filmed the night of was terrible. I played TRICKSTAR Pure to X-2-1 on Day 1, made it to Day 2, won all of my matches, and then did not make it into top 64. My breakers came back to haunt me. So, a little heartbreaking, but excited to have made Day 2, happy to have played, a little frustrated that I didn't walk away with the TRICKSTAR mat, but you win some, you lose some. Here's the deck I played. It is TRICKSTAR Pure. It starts with some pretty innovative and interesting cards. 3 TRICKSTAR Candina, 3 TRICKSTAR Lycoris, 1 TRICKSTAR Lilybell. One of the main advantages to playing this deck over the SkyStar variant is 1, you get to save $500 on Sky Striker engine, and 2, you get to play a multitude of hand traps. We've got 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 3 Droll and Lockbird, and the MVP of the weekend, 3 Psyframe Gear Gamma and 1 Psyframe Driver. These were incredible all weekend and facilitate some of the more important heads-up plays that you have to be performing in order to compete in a field of decks that are generally better than yours. For spells, we have 3 copies of TRICKSTAR Lightstage, 3 copies of Terraforming to find TRICKSTAR Lightstage, 3 copies of Pot of Desires to win the game immediately and banish both Gamma and Lilybell, I think every single time I used it, 3 copies of Scapegoat, I can't believe this card is still legal, 1 copy of Darkhole and 1 copy of Regeki. These are more than a little suspect, but were pretty good for me all weekend. Non-Sky Striker Pure Sky Striker decks will repeatedly end on Kagari that you can't out with Candina because it has more than 1800 attack. This version of the deck specifically has problems dealing with monsters like that. So, as a result, we're playing Darkhole and Regeki to out that specifically. Not nearly as good against normal SkyStar because they can always just keep reusing the Ray activations, but good enough against SkyStar that we kept it in. 3 Reincarnation, of course, pretty normal in these more all-in TRICKSTAR versions of the deck. 3 Solemn Strike, this was good all weekend. It ended up being a trap that was pretty good against most of the field. I tried to find for the 6 trap slots I had available something that would hit both Goki consistently and Sky Striker or TRICKSTAR variants. This is what I settled on, and it did exactly what it had to almost every single game. And finally, 3 Torrential. I would not play this again. This card was terrible. But occasionally it won me games against Goki after they had set up a couple of nightmares without spell and trap protection. One of the things you have to be doing in this specific version of the deck is kind of going in on some heads-up plays that make little to no intuitive sense to people who have played exclusively SkyStar variants of the deck. I have notes here on what they are. The first thing that I did all weekend was use Reincarnation in the standby phase. This deck has a really hard problem dealing with damage thresholds. Like, you have to get to 2800 on turn 1 pretty quickly, or else you're just not going to be able to assemble enough damage. Other decks can poke through with, like, Mech Knights or Kagaris or Afterburners clearing the only monster. We don't have that, we aren't afforded that privilege, so we have to be using all of our Reincarnation activations to do as much as possible. Additionally, you have to be really into Reincarnation Droll and Lock looping people. Most TRICKSTAR players don't do it anymore, and SkyStar players usually can't assemble it because you're only playing 2 Reincarnation in the deck total, and it's hard to, like, hard draw into it. This deck has tons of hands that specifically make that combo. The only hand trap that, like, screws with that is Ash Blossom, which is why we're on Gamma. If you're able to, like, Droll and Lock loop them, then Gamma their Ash, that's just the end of the game, and it feels super debilitating. So we're making main deck choices specifically to facilitate that line of play, and automatically drolling people. Routinely what I do, especially in blind game 1s, is flip up a Reincarnation even without the ability to Droll and Lock loop them, because no good player is going to allow you to do that of their own volition. They'll just set their whole hand before they add a Searcher. So if you just Reincarnation in standby phase to push in a little more damage, then Droll them once the resolution is done, you have put them under Droll anyway, and almost no deck can play under that at all. Let's go to the side deck. This is the extra I lied to you. First, we have Borlo Dragon, incredibly important, specifically in this version of the deck, because it pushes through big guys. Firewall came up, I think, once I Firewall OTK'd someone, but we don't have access to, like, Goblin because we're not on Hornet drones, so it doesn't happen nearly as often as it should. Nightmare's Mermaid to out the Eebly special summon stop. Cerberus, Phoenix, and Unicorn because they're pretty good cards. These were great all weekend. And then Link Spider, Linkaribo, and Mrs. Radiant. Mrs. Radiant was fantastic because a lot of people on similar versions of this deck were playing in the Torrential Tribute spot things like Goes and match, and Mrs. Radiant plus Link Spider still allows you to push for a fair amount of damage, enough that a couple of well-timed reincarnations will win you the game if you're under Gozen. Finally, TRICKSTAR Holly Angel is the last relevant Link monster. Really important for anyone playing Trickstars to know your Holly Angel thresholds. She's incredibly good, and if you're able to, like, normal summon Candina, special summon a copy of Lilybell, link into Holly Angel, banish a reincarnation for Lilybell, and start looping Licorices, you can deal upwards of 4,000 damage without ever having to attack any monsters your opponent controls. Very important in a format dominated by, like, Mech Knights and stuff. And finally, Psyframe Lord Omega. Whenever I made this guy, I won. Obviously, he's insane. I have 4 Cherries targets, Double Helix, Isolde, and Kagari. I think these are pretty self-explanatory. I wish Double Helix had been better. I lost to a Spiral player really early, and would have liked to have seen Cherries with that. And finally, Heavy Metal Foes Electromite. Someone in my Discord got me really scared of pendulums right before I left for the tournament. I ended up not hitting them all day, but I had nothing else to board in, so it was reasonable. Let's do the side deck real quick. We've had to cut a couple of takes because of 4th of July fireworks outside. It's not even the 4th, it's the 2nd. First, we have 3 copies of Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries. This card was fantastic. Came in over Torrential Tribute almost every single time I went second, because I have so many targets. 3 copies of Anti-Spell Fragrance, also fantastic. Came in almost every time I went first, except for, like, Goki matches or something like that. My deck particularly really benefits from stumbling turns, like set 5 pass, like hope that you don't OTK me, because I'm playing such a high concentration of both Trickstars and Trickstar enablers that it's pretty easy to do so. 3 copies of Shared Ride. This card was fine. Didn't do what I wanted it to. I hoped this would read win the game. Instead it just read end the turn, and occasionally there are decks that can beat that. 3 copies of Winged Dragon of Rosh Sphere Mode. This was a kaiju until the last minute. I got a little spooked in side events of Goki, and it ended up being okay, but was always part of a larger strategy where I ended up winning the game because I just had enough removal spells, not just, you know, because they extra linked me and I hit a sphere mode. So it was fine. Maybe I'd bump it down. Maybe I'd think about kaijus for, you know, relevance against a rogue or something, but wasn't particularly impressed. And finally, Red Reboot. This card was awful. Once again, an inclusion because I got scared at the last minute of other people playing pure Trickstar, which ended up being particularly helpful. I actually can't beat hands in which any Trickstar player resolves Reincarnation for any amount of meaningful damage. I'll do matchups real quick. I lost rounds 1 and 2, just really debilitating against Sky Striker Pure and Spiral in that order. Next, I got my free win because my opponent didn't show up, followed by True Draco Cosmo, a match I didn't think I would win because this deck has kind of a hard time against Rogue. Then I tied against Goki, a really bad first 5 rounds. He extra linked me immediately in Game 3 as we went into time and made Gumblar, but couldn't get me to take 3,000 points of damage before the phase end. Then I won against, in order, Sky Striker Pure, Goki, Mech Knight, Sky Striker. That got me into Day 2, and then in Day 2 I won against Trickstar Pure, playing Gozen Match, and Sky Striker Trickstar, but it was not enough. 71st place, I'm not that tilted about it, but pretty impressive finish for someone who did not expect to get particularly far. Thank you to everyone who supported me. Thank you to my Discord. I know Meatmoto specifically played like 1,000 games against me, which was extremely helpful in recognizing things like I need to be standby phasing, using Reincarnation and things like that. Hope to be repping this deck at some point in the future, but there's no way that parts of it don't get banned. See ya!